Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Ramya bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. First G20 Infrastructure Working Group meeting under India's presidency will be held in Pune on Monday. India celebrates 75th Army Day. Defence Minister of India Rajnath Singh tells armed forces to be future ready to take on security challenges. Death toll in Nepal plane crash rises to 68. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi expresses grief at the loss of lives. World Economic Forum Summit kicks off at Davos in Switzerland on Monday. Cooperation in a fragmented world theme for this year's meeting. India announces donation of 12,500 doses of pentavalent vaccines to Cuba. U.S. President Joe Biden declares emergencies for storms in California and tornadoes in Alabama. Miss USA R. Bonnie Gabriel crowned Miss Universe. In cricket, India beat Sri Lanka by record 317 runs in the third ODI at Thiruvananthapuram. Clean sweep the series 3-0. And in Hockey World Cup, match between India and England ends in a goalless draw. Spain beat Wales 5-1 in another pool match. We begin the world news with our segment G20 in India. The first G20 Infrastructure Working Group IWG meeting under India's presidency will be held in the city of Pune on Monday. Briefing media about the meeting on Sunday, Joint Secretary in India's Finance Ministry, Solomon Arogyaraj said, the flagship priority to be discussed in this meeting is financing cities of tomorrow, inclusive, resilient and sustainable. The theme will focus on various facets of making cities economic centers of growth, financing urban infrastructure, building future-ready urban infrastructure, directing fiscal investments for unlocking private financing for energy-efficient and environmentally sustainable infrastructure, and mitigating social imbalances.
Since urban centers grow, there will be a lot of pressure on the natural ecosystem. So we need to conserve them for future. So that's going to be one of the key themes. Second theme is resilience. Resilience is ability of the city to withstand any shock. Maybe it is because of the climatic factor or maybe because of the economic situation. These kind of shocks when happen, how should cities respond and recover faster? The third one is inclusivity. So equal access for services for every citizen.
The meeting will be hosted by the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, along with Australia and Brazil as the co-chairs. 66 delegates from more than 30 countries will be participating in the two-day event. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Voice of Global South Summit. In conversation are former diplomat Shilkant Sharma and journalist Sanjay Jha.
The Leaders' Voice of Global South Summit 2023 envisages bringing together countries of the Global South and sharing their perspectives and priorities on a common platform across a whole range of issues. All the countries congratulated India on the G20 presidency and expected positive outcomes. The ministers mentioned that the problem of climate change is common for all countries, whether developed or developing, but the solution is not easy for the developing states, as they lack the technological and financial support. They highlighted the role of South-South cooperation in tackling the challenges of climate change. Dr. Sharma, you have led India's foreign policy as a former diplomat. If you can tell us what exactly is this Global South Summit?
Well, this is the pre-G20 high-level consultations among the countries of the South initiated by our Prime Minister to get the voice of the Global South, which can be then transmitted in a very coherent way to the G20 summit. As the Prime Minister said in his concluding remarks, that the distilled action points for Global South, both what we should do together and what we seek from the international community. So this, I think, is the purpose of the summit. And Prime Minister's statement inaugurating the summit lays down many very important points, each of which resonate with India's deep-seated concern about what we say about the one world and about the family, world as a family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as they say in Sanskrit. So, and in that context, how the countries of the South, the developing world, the three quarters of humanity, how they see this the whole situation today. I think Prime Minister's opening remarks say that the world is in crisis and it's not clear how long it will last. So the point is that we who are facing this crisis should have our voices heard. And that is the point he emphasized, that the 8-decade-old model of global governance, the global South does not have an adequate voice, and it should shape the emerging order. I think this shows the emphasis. And there's another point which PM made again in the concluding remarks, that we need to escape the cycle of dependency on systems and circumstances which are not of our making. This is very relevant in the context of the crisis, the climate change, as Prime Minister again very concisely put it, the natural climate and the geopolitical climate, the problems of that, which covers all the dimensions, from pandemic to terrorism to conflicts and wars, which have all had an impact on the well-being and prosperity of our people. So the need to get together and exchange views and get ideas, seems to be the purpose of the summit, and PM thanked everyone for their views.
The summit strengthened India's, credential as a representative of the global South. The External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has repeatedly emphasized the fallout of the Ukraine crisis on global South in terms of the increase in food and fuel prices. The summit, which has a theme of unity of voice, unity of purpose. You think this is a kind of a new group which has come up to take up their cause, their voice in the international fora, and India is going to lead this group?
I would not go so far as to think about a formative process in terms of a group or a structure. Point is that this is very important as a consultative process at the very high level, at the level of a summit, just before the G20. And the G20 is going to take place, the summit is going to take place in India at a very critical juncture in the evolution of international geopolitics and the geoeconomics. And all of these have an impact on the fate of developing countries. So there's a need to get them on board, get their views, get the coherence in their concerns, because as the statements indicated, they have common concerns. So get them together and then, telescope them into the process of the G20 consultations, which are also separately progressing under the meetings of the Sherpas and the sous-Sherpas. So this summit is a very forward-looking initiative, and it has come from the top in India. And if you look at the statements, like for instance, we, the global South, have the largest stakes in the future. We should also have an equivalent voice. Then, and the mantra which PM has given of respond, recognize, respect, and reform. And what does it say? It says, to re-energize the world, we should together call for a global agenda of respond, recognize, respect, and reform. And what is respond? Respond to the priorities of the global South by framing an inclusive and balanced international agenda. Recognize that the principle of common and differentiated responsibilities applies to all global challenges. Not common but differentiated responsibilities is the core for our approach to climate change discussions in the summits. And but Prime Minister says that these apply to even, say, debt crisis, even a pandemic, all the global crises which have come to fore over the last 2 years. They all bear this, have a bearing on this common but differentiated responsibility. The third point is respect sovereignty of all nations, equality, rule of law, and peaceful solution or resolution of disputes and conflicts. And then lastly, reform of international institutions, including the United Nations. to make them more relevant. Now, these are again in sutra form, in concise form, conveying the concerns of the developing world.
Dr. Sharma, 2023 is very different, and the world feels very different in this year. From climate negotiations to exports to diplomacy, the global south is becoming more and more powerful. And we see the global politics trend is not what is getting enough attention. The global south is becoming more and more visible and influential in every area, from climate change, the big climate summit, which has been remembered for a breakthrough agreement of a loss and damage that was also possible because of global south. So Prime Minister Modi talks about a global south must create a new world order. So what does he mean by a new world order? You're talking about UN, you're talking about other institutions. What exactly does Prime Minister is talking about?
Well, this again he said, together we must attempt to redesign global political and financial governance. This can remove inequalities, enlarge opportunities, support growth, and spread progress and prosperity. So this is the purpose of how we shape the emerging global order. And the need of the hour is to identify simple, scalable, and sustainable solutions that can transform our societies and economies, whether it is poverty, universal health care, or building human capacities. In all these areas, we have to overcome difficult challenges. And then he goes back to the last century, that in the last century, we supported each other in our fight against foreign rule. We can do it again in this century to create a new world order that will ensure the welfare of our citizens. And as far as India is concerned, your voice, that is the voice of the global south, is India's voice. And the priorities of global south are India's priorities. Now, you might say that this is all very well, but what about the tangible things? So about the tangible things, again, we have repeated that our development partnership over all geographies and diverse sectors have continued. We supplied medicines and vaccines to over 100 countries during the pandemic. India has always stood for a greater role for developing countries in determining our common future. And one earth, one family, one future. This is the mantra.
Absolutely, Dr. Sharma. Thank you very much for your time.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Sunday flagged off virtually the Vande Bharat Express train connecting Secunderabad in Telangana with Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. Speaking on the occasion, he said Vande Bharat Express is a symbol of the potential of New India, which is on the path of rapid change. Mr. Modi said the train will enhance ease of living, boost tourism and benefit the economy.
वंदे भारत ट्रेन इसकी एक और विशेषता भी है। ये ट्रेन नए भारत के संकल्पों और सामर्थ्य का प्रतीक है। ये उस भारत का प्रतीक है जो तेज बदलाव के रास्ते पर चल पड़ा है। ऐसा भारत जो अपने सपनों, अपनी आकांक्षाओं को लेकर अधीर है। हर हिंदुस्तानी अधीर है। ऐसा भारत जो तेजी से चलकर अपने लक्ष्य तक पहुंचना चाहता है।
Mr. Modi mentioned the Vande Bharat Express signifies that India wants the best of everything. He elaborated that connectivity is directly related to development as it connects not only infrastructure but also connects dreams to realities. He said travelling on Indian railways is becoming a pleasant experience today and a picture of new India is emerging through railway stations. India celebrated 75th Army Day on Sunday. Addressing an event as part of Army Day in Bengaluru on Sunday, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh exhorted armed forces to further develop capabilities and work on strategies and policies, keeping the global security scenario and future challenges in mind.
मैं हमारी सेनाओं से आह्वान करता हूं, समय के बदलने के साथ साथ आपकी एडॉप्टेशन की क्षमता है, उसे और अधिक डेवलप करिए। बदलती दुनिया और बदलते सुरक्षा माहौल से हमने जो सीखें ली हैं, उसे हम अपनी प्रैक्टिस में लाएं और अपने आप को लगातार अपडेट करने की दिशा में आगे बढ़ते रहें। मैं ये कहना चाहूंगा, आप भी आने वाले कल को ध्यान में रखते हुए अपनी स्ट्रेटजी, टैक्टिक्स और पॉलिसीज पर काम करें।
The Defence Minister lauded the armed forces for ensuring the country's territorial integrity and upholding rich tradition with unmatched bravery. The Defence Minister recalled the bravery of the armed forces during 1962, 1965, 1971 and 1999 wars and the recent incidents in Galwan and Tawang. Mr. Singh expressed hope that by 2027, India will be one of the top economies in the world and it will occupy the top slot, and hence security plays an important role to safeguard the national interest. Earlier in the day, speaking at an event, Chief of Army Staff General Manoj Bharat said that the Indian Army is modernizing weapons and infrastructure, improving its processes and systems, adopting advanced technologies and partnering with industries to develop indigenous weapons and equipment to meet the present and future challenges. General Bharat said the Indian Army is ready to tackle any contingency along the Indian borders. The Army Chief pointed out that a strong defence posture and the use of anti-drone technologies have acted as a countermeasure against cross-border terrorism and insurgency. He promised that measures will be taken to tackle targeted killings in Jammu and Kashmir. President of India, Draupadi Murmu, recalled Indian Army soldiers' sacrifices on the occasion of Army Day. In her message, President Murmu said they have always pushed the frontiers of valour and courage and also acted as saviours in times of calamities. India's Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar greeted all Indian Army personnel and veterans on the occasion. In his message, Mr. Dhankhar said their valour, determination and devotion to duty form the foundation of India's security. Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, conveyed his best wishes to all Army personnel, veterans and families. Mr. Modi said every Indian is proud of the Army and will always be grateful to the soldiers. India has announced donation of 12,500 doses of pentavalent vaccines to Cuba. India's Minister of State for External Affairs, Meenakshi Lekhi, announced this during her official visit to Cuba from 12th to 14th of this month. This was her first visit to Cuba. During her visit, Ms. Lekhi had a fruitful interaction with Speaker of Cuban Parliament, Esteban Lazo Hernandez. Both the leaders discussed various issues, including development of indigenous vaccines against COVID and women empowerment. Ms. Lekhi apprised Ms. Hernandez about policies of the Government of India and emphasized on the need to further strengthen cooperation between the two parliaments. During the meeting with the Acting Minister of External Relations of Cuba, Gerardo Peñalver Portal, both sides discussed issues of common interest and expressed willingness to enhance cooperation in development assistance programs, trade and investment, energy, disaster management, culture, health and pharma, Ayush and Bharat technology, biotechnology. Detailed discussions were also held on International Year of Millets 2023, sustainability and climate change. This is All India Radio giving you the world news. Welcome back to World News. In Nepal, the death toll in the plane crash this morning has gone up to 68. The mishap occurred when a 72-seater Yeti Airlines plane crashed into the gorge of River Seti near Pokhara International Airport. A total of 68 passengers, including 5 Indians and 15 foreigners and 4 crew members were on board the ill-fated plane. According to reports, the plane coming from Kathmandu crashed when it was attempting to land at the Pokhara International Airport amid bad weather conditions. Immediately after the mishap, the Nepal government called an emergency meeting of the Council of Ministers. A 5-member commission has been formed to probe the mishap. More from our Kathmandu correspondent.
The cause of the mishap is not immediately clear. The Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal has issued a helpline number for Tribhuvan International Airport +97701 411 3163 and Yeti Airlines helpline number 980-100-7531. Indian Embassy has issued a helpline number 98511-07021 for Kathmandu and 98560-37699 for Pokhara. At the crash site, the newly inaugurated Pokhara International Airport, rescuers sprayed water hoses to control the fire. Hundreds of soldiers started retrieving the bodies, many of which were beyond recognition. Shweta Singh for World News, Kathmandu.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed grief at the loss of lives. He said in a tweet, pained by the tragic air crash in Nepal in which precious lives have been lost. U.S. President Joe Biden approved an emergency declaration for California on Saturday after storms that pounded the Golden State killed at least 19 people. This has led to floods, power outages, mudslides, evacuations, and road closures in California. The White House, in a statement, said President Biden ordered federal aid to supplement state, tribal, and local recovery efforts in the areas affected by the storms. The president's action makes federal funding available to the affected individuals in Merced, Sacramento, and Santa Cruz counties. Mr. Biden also approved an emergency declaration for Alabama on Sunday after at least 9 people died in tornadoes, destroying homes and knocked out power to tens of thousands in southeastern United States. The annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, WEF, will begin on Monday at Davos in Switzerland. The meeting will continue till 20th of this month. The theme for this year's WEF meeting is Cooperation in a Fragmented World. The congregation of experts, academics, investors, political and business leaders will discuss some of the pressing issues the world is facing today, such as the Russia-Ukraine crisis, global inflation and climate change, and promote innovative solutions. Global leaders taking part in the meeting include European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, European Parliament President Roberta Metsola, South African President Cyril M. Ramaphosa, Spain Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, Swiss President Alain Berset, and Finland Prime Minister Sanna Marin. Strong participation of leaders from India is expected at the summit. In a first, a leading Pakistani daily has lauded India's expanding global footprint and its growing stature on the world stage under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The daily said, Prime Minister Modi has brought India to the point where the nation has begun to cast a wider net of its influence and impact. The op-ed column in a leading Pakistani daily further stated that under Mr. Modi, India's foreign policy has treaded skillfully and its GDP has grown to over $3 trillion. Calling it monumental progress, the op-ed column written by Shehzad Chaudhry, a noted political, security and defense analyst, called India a preferred destination for all investors. The writer further reiterated that India has, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, established its own domain on the foreign policy front. Festivals of Makar Sankranti, Magh Bihu and Pongal were celebrated in different parts of India on Sunday. In the state of Uttar Pradesh, despite the biting cold, thousands of devotees started taking dip at holy rivers from the early morning on the occasion of Makar Sankranti. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has greeted the nation on the occasion. Mr. Modi prayed for everyone's happiness and well-being and said, "May there be abundance of joy in people's lives." The Tamil community in Sri Lanka celebrated Thai Pongal on Sunday with fervour and gaiety. Our Colombo correspondent has the details.
The Tamil Hindu community in Sri Lanka, which numbers upwards of 25 lakhs, thronged the temples today to thank for the abundance of previous year's harvest and pray for a successful one in the coming year. The multi-day celebration of Pongal marks the beginning of sun's journey northward, signaling the end of the winter solstice. Celebrations began early in the morning with making of beautiful designs of kolam before every house. The traditional cooking of Pongal with newly harvested rice with milk and jaggery in an open area and cries of Pongalo, Pongal echoed everywhere as the boiling of Pongal overflowed the pots. Festivities would continue on Mattu Pongal and Kanum Pongal as the Tamil Hindu community celebrates it with cows and exchanging of gifts over the next 2 days. While the island nation is making efforts to recover from the economic crisis, the festival of Pongal gives some hope. For World News, this is Ahmed Moin Faruqi from Colombo.
In Israel, thousands of protesters have rallied in the capital Tel Aviv and other cities against the plans by the new coalition government to overhaul the judiciary. According to media reports, the reforms would make it easier for Parliament to overturn Supreme Court rulings, among other things. Local media reported that rallies were also held outside Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem and in the northern city of Haifa. Under the plans announced by Justice Minister Yariv Levin earlier this month, a simple majority in the Parliament would have the power to effectively annul Supreme Court rulings. China on Saturday reported that nearly 60,000 people with COVID-19 had died in hospitals since it abandoned its zero-COVID policy last month. It is a huge increase from previously reported figures that follows global criticism of the country's coronavirus data. In early December, Beijing abruptly dismantled its strict 3-year antivirus regime of frequent testing, travel curbs and mass lockdowns after widespread protests in late November, and cases have surged since then across the nation of 1.4 billion. Miss USA R. Bonnie Gabriel has been crowned as the Miss Universe 2022. Gabriel took the crown ahead of Amanda Dudamel from Venezuela and Adriana Martinez from the Dominican Republic. 28-year-old R. Bonnie Gabriel is a model, fashion designer and sewing instructor who prioritizes the environment in her work. She is also the first Filipino-American to win Miss USA. The 71st Miss Universe pageant was held at New Orleans in Louisiana on Saturday night with 84 women from around the world competing for the crown. In cricket, India scripted history today by defeating Sri Lanka by the largest ever margin of 317 runs in 50-over international cricket. With this, India also clean sweep the series 3-0. Previous record of a win by a largest ever margin was with New Zealand for 290-run win over Ireland in 2008. Today's match was at Thiruvananthapuram. Chasing the target of 391 runs, visitors were all out at 73 in 22 overs. Earlier, a century each by Shubham Gill and Virat Kohli guided Team India to a whopping total of 390 for 5. Gill slammed second ODI century of his career with 116 runs, and Kohli remained unbeaten at 166 runs, scoring his 46th ODI century of his career. Kohli today broke 2 of Sachin Tendulkar's all-time records. In the FIH Hockey World Cup today, a Pool D match between India and England ended in a goalless draw at Birsa Munda International Hockey Stadium in Rourkela. In the stipulated time, no team could score a goal. Earlier in another Pool D match, Spain registered first win by beating Wales 5-1 at the same venue. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Straits Times writes, Russia hits Ukraine with fresh missile strikes, damaging vital infrastructure in Kyiv and Kharkiv. The Guardian also writes, Brazil's new leaders to fight hard in wake of insane coup attempt. The Washington Post reports, former Russian president says Japanese leader should disembowel himself. The New York Times writes, Iran executes former defense official, a dual UK citizen, on spy charges. The Business Recorder reports Pakistan economy grinding to a halt as dollars dry up. Japan Times writes Kishida and Biden meeting heralds and alliance in lockstep, but challenges remain. Le Monde writes storm-battered California gets more wind, rain and snow. And now a quick look at the headlines once again. First G20 Infrastructure Working Group meeting under India's presidency will be held in Pune on Monday. India celebrates 75th Army Day. Defence Minister of India Rajnath Singh tells armed forces to be future-ready to take on security challenges. Death toll in Nepal plane crash rises to 68. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi expresses grief at the loss of lives. World Economic Forum Summit kicks off at Davos in Switzerland on Monday. Cooperation in a fragmented world theme for this year's meeting. India announces donation of 12,500 doses of pentavalent vaccines to Cuba. U.S. President Joe Biden declares emergencies for storms in California and tornadoes in Alabama. Miss USA R. Bonnie Gabriel crowned Miss Universe. In cricket, India beat Sri Lanka by record 317 runs in the third ODI at Thiruvananthapuram. Clean sweep the series 3-0. And in Hockey World Cup, match between India and England ends in a goalless draw. Spain beat Wales 5-1 in another pool match. And now before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Morocco.
वैष्णव जन तो तेनी कहिए जे वीर परा